Welcome to Peer Talk, a dialogue with business owners just like you. Peer Talk conversations run the gamut of business challenges facing owners today. The host of Peer Talk is Dan Crowley, founder and owner of Peer Executive Groups, which provides a safe space for owners to share their experience, grow their businesses, and learn from their peers.
Okay, welcome to Peer Talk. There are a number of great business owners out there, just like yourself, who would love to share their experiences with you, and we hope to give them a voice. Welcome to Peer Talk. Today we have a very special podcast for you. We have Kurt Barney with us from Vandalia Rental. So Kurt and I will be discussing his company, his origins with his company, as well as really the board of advisors that he has in place. And he may have a different name for that, but we have a number of members who are currently in the process of this. And I know that Vandalia's had some success. So Kurt, welcome. And I just want to start by asking you a little bit about your background. If you could just speak to us about, when you started with the industry rental and how you kind of grew up in the Vandalia system.
Yeah, certainly. So my father is a second generation. My grandfather started our company in 1961. So I could make the argument that when I was born in 1981 is when I started in the industry, because a lot of the projects around the house is where I became initially familiar with the equipment. But unofficially, I worked the majority of the summers growing up in the business, starting with just mowing the grass, cleaning the ashtrays, and then ultimately working on the on-off rent team, inside sales, a short stint as mechanic, driver, just to learn the different facets of the business. So then I was not allowed to come back to the business until certain criteria had been met, one of which is I had to attain a 4-year degree. So I shipped off to college, worked some of the summers in between, graduated, and then I was still not invited back until I'd worked somewhere else for a period of time. Did that and rejoined the company officially in late 2004 full-time.
Gotcha. Okay, so in 2004, you come back, and at this time, who's running the company? Is your father running it, or?
My father is running it, yes.
Okay, and did he have lieutenants as well, or was it more of it was his show and he had a bunch of employees who reported to him?
No, he had a core group of individuals that were his strategy team, if you will, that helped guide him and coach him through some of the decisions that needed made within the business. I would say that he still had the dominant decision-making capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Have those folks in place.
Gotcha. And you evolved in your role in the company. I believe you took the lead maybe in 2011. Why don't you tell us about those 7 years? What was that like? What were some of the things you were doing? When
I was first invited back, I had to wait until an open position was posted that I could apply for, and a purchasing role became available. So I was hired in, had one of the more awkward interviews of my life with my father, and ultimately was offered a position. So I started in purchasing in 2004. We had just built an addition where we were looking to move into the supply side of the business. And we built that up a little bit up until about 2007, until a desk showed up one day, and it got moved into my old man's office, and we basically started playing Battleship for the next 3 years. He told me that, you need to learn to ask questions because I'm not 100% sure how to teach you, but this is the best way I know to do it. So we transitioned slowly and incrementally over time. He just started allowing me to do more and coaching and mentoring me through the journey until 2008, when things got a little choppier in the waters, which was really the best learning and transition environment you could have asked for in hindsight. And I definitely mean that in hindsight. And then in 2009, we started our successional process early. I was still in my 20s at the time. And then in 2011, we finalized that, and I moved into the president's role.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so in 2011, as you're coming into the president's role, why don't you tell the audience, our members here, our listeners, what that was like in terms of introducing. Why don't you introduce us to the concept of your board, and how that was introduced to you?
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned a second ago, I was in my 20s when this was taking place, and that's atypical, I think, at least in our industry, from a successional and transition time.
Yes, I would say.
One of the concerns that was shared from my father um, and frankly his bankers was just that is my youth and inexperience within a leadership role within this industry. So we made the decision, and by we, I mean my father made the decision that there would be additional criteria that would have to take place. And to hold myself accountable and to make sure that we were strategic in our approach to this, one of the things through our succession that was recommended to us was to set up a board of advisors so that I had a structured set of accountability, but we didn't move into a director's role because that's not what we wanted to do from the business at that stage.
I think also, just a quick pause here. There are some legalities around having a board of directors versus a board of advisors. There's more liability with directors, and I think that it's important for everybody to understand that and research that part of it.
Absolutely. This board of advisors certainly a crawl before you sprint.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And so when that happened, was it just voila, you ended up walking into a room one day and there were 10 people, or how did that evolve?
No, that was a journey in alone by itself, Dan. We through our transitional process, we enlisted the help of an organization named Airlon, and one of the services that they provided was how to set up a board of advisors. So we really had a coach through that process that was incredibly valuable in those early stages because you really don't know how to do it. And there's, at least in our end, there was a lot of intimidation about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you find these caliber individuals that would be willing to work at that level for little old us in that capacity? So we enlisted their services. They handheld us through the beginning, and they taught us how to put together a marketing brochure, a SWOT analysis, tell our story, a 3-year plan, and basically a small brochure about how to attract and retain these individuals and what the expectation should be on both sides. So I would say they were incredibly valuable. They also taught us some of the structure that needed to be there, the legalese of the hold harmless, non-disclosures, non-competes, confidentiality, that stuff. And then how to establish term limits and moratoriums, which is compensation for the meeting, and just the overall infrastructure so that you didn't feel like you were flying blind.
Gotcha. So from an organization standpoint, first off, amazing that a consultant is available to have that kind of conversation with an owner. I wasn't actually aware that could happen, but that obviously makes sense on the strategic consultant level. And you had brought up a couple of interesting comments. You said the word term limits and moratorium. I think you said, right? Is that a
Moratorium, yeah.
Yeah,
I believe is a fancy word for compensation.
Got it. Okay, so tell us about what that means. Why are term limits important?
Term limits are important because I believe over time, most people will form relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
articulated to us was if you can't get what you need out of these individuals in 3 years, you really have gotten all you're going to get. So what we have found, having a board that has turned over a couple times now, is that you do develop these relationships and there becomes a comfortability with those relationships. But also, you extend your board because these people are always available to you because of that relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
you take advantage of moving forward and kind of pivoting your competencies that you may need in these positions along your journey as those needs change within the business as well.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. And boy, I love the idea of turning over the board, meaning you have these influencers / relationships of alumni who've kind of rolled off the board, right? So that's got to have some benefit.
Oh, absolutely. It's been awesome, to be honest. because you may not need or know, what you're going to need in the future.
Hmm.
The part
Okay.
that I never really fully understood or gave the value to is these individuals, because of their high caliber, also come with a strong Rolodex that can point you in directions even if they don't have the competency they need. And having the breadth and depth of that Rolodex and those individuals in your corner really help you when you're trying to solve complex problems.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And so they obviously, there's something that pulls them to this, not just compensation. By the way, compensation, is it, and you don't need to give us exactly the numbers, but is it an hourly or is it just a stipend per meeting or something like that?
No, it's a straight flat rate per meeting plus
Got
expense.
it. Got it. Straight. Okay. Makes sense. And what's your frequency? How often do you have the board gather? Or,
We started it quarterly, but what we
Mhm.
found is that was a little too frequent for what we needed, and so we moved to 3 times a year.
Gotcha. That
Every
makes
4 months.
sense. Yeah, I can see that once you've established. Now, how did you grow into the agenda for that board meeting? What does that look like? And tell me a little bit about the story of how that has changed.
That's very interesting, Dan. I think the first meeting was that awkward first date you would go on.
Hmm.
There was a lot of fumbling through it. You really just rehashed your story. You spent half your meeting making introductions to the different individuals in the room, to them telling their stories. And then you kind of lay out 1 to 3 talking points. And our talking points that first meeting were really just what should our talking points be moving forward? What questions do you have? What are you seeing that we're not? So on and henceforth. But then as you get to about your third meeting and you're almost a year in at this point, or 6 months rather, I guess, if you're meeting quarterly, it really starts to gel a little bit. You've communicated between the meetings and you're starting to see what's percolating up with the business. You're feeling more comfortable opening up about what your genuine needs are and your vulnerabilities are. And then
Hmm.
you start to get to that high level conversation.
Got it. Okay, so it does evolve. So it's not like you're still using the exact same agenda that you had the first time.
Now, our agenda has changed every meeting on whatever we believe our strategic talking points need to be for that meeting.
S-
Put all that together in advance. We send it out. They've got 2 weeks to digest it, and then they come with questions, and you rehash for maybe the first half hour. Our meetings are 4 hours long, half days, and then I would say for about 3 hours we get into the core talking points, and typically you rarely exceed 3.
Gotcha. And so I think a number of our members over the years that I've known them have spoken about how they like to do a board of advisors, but I think they're hesitant because they're so intimidated by what their responsibility is. Do you run the meeting? Are you in a leadership role on that? And what do they expect you to be bringing to the table?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. To answer it, I do run the meetings. I put out the talking points. I send out the agenda in advance with all the supporting information about the business that's necessary for that meeting so that they do their pre-work. When we get to the meeting, we do our best to follow the agenda, but I would say only half the time we actually accomplish that. There might be
Mm,
if that it makes sense, but I'm probably the driving force and they are there from a experience sharing, a fact finding, and a advisory capacity. So if they have questions or seeing something that I didn't add to the agenda, they are certainly adding that. But the majority of the time, it's me really using them as my sounding board to become those advisors.
got it. So experience sharing, fact finding, and then from that they then provide advisement. So that's actually a good blueprint for a introductory email to someone to say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about our board." Do you? How do you? Well, why don't you tell us about the makeup and the different people you've had on the board through the years and where their backgrounds are?
Absolutely. The when we started this, it was certainly a journey that had a couple speed bumps, and I too was intimidated about the whole thing. Through our coaching, we determined that we really needed a couple competencies on our board. And we boiled that down to finance, banking, cash flow management at a high level, sales and marketing leadership, family business leadership in a growth-based organization that was 3 to 5 times our size in revenues. And then we wanted rental experience, a high-level rental experience that had a wide breadth and depth that could advise us, because we all like to pretend that the rental industry is totally unique from any other business. And the reality of that is it's true and false, or at least that we've come to believe, is there's a lot of, but there is some uniqueness. So having that second individual in the room that understood those dynamics has really helped us articulate that if we started to feel like if the business was all the same in how businesses run. So we were able to find a former president of one of the top 10 largest equipment rental companies in North America, an individual that owned and operated one of the top 25 highest ranked sales and marketing leadership training companies in the United States, and a former CFO, controller of a publicly traded company, as well as the president of a family business that cut his teeth in the uniform rental industry, grew to a 9-figure business, and was part of a non-family leadership role at a strategic level for them.
Gotcha. And that's outstanding. So for people out there, obviously finance important, someone who might be from the banking financing industry, someone who may have some understanding of how to build sales systems and how to go out and help grow the business, family business, as well as rental experience is good. What about human resources, organizational behavior? Did you ever have anybody on your board who had those types of skill sets?
We have not in an official high-level capacity, but one of the things that was unique in our transition is one of the first strategic hires that we added to our team was a high-level HR individual. So we felt that we were in a pretty strong position for that internally.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And then how many actually are in the room with you when you do this 3-time-year event?
We currently maintain a board of 5. The one that I omitted earlier on is we have a legacy position, and that role is not have a term limit. That is my father's role. And he is deselecting at this stage of the game because his confidence is grown. But we have 3 board members, myself and my father, in the room.
Gotcha. Okay. And your current board, what are the skill sets of those 3 additional individuals right now? Are they, do you still have the rental person, or have they rolled off?
We still have the high-level rental. We still have the sales and marketing leadership. We're actually on our second individual in that sales and marketing leadership. And we have the family business. We've identified another individual that had a strong growth excavation company that was sold about 4 years ago that has been highly recommended to us to succeed that person in the coming term.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk briefly about, how you use this board. So in 2016, let's say it's 2015, you're 4 years into leadership, you've been running the main store, and you start to think about expansion into multi-site. So that conversation, and I'm sure it happened before 2015, but as you start to introduce your theory on multi-site and the value of it, talk us through how that evolved, and tell us a little bit about, how that grew, whether it be number of employees or total rental sales revenue or anything like that. And then also, especially, sorry about that, especially, how did the board give you feedback as you kind of presented your case?
No, absolutely. Once, I'd kind of assumed the role of president, and for a few years, you start to look at it and you start to figure out where the gaps may be in your SWOT and how you want to fill those gaps. So we had some meetings that are our board meetings associated with those. And one of the things that we determined was we didn't have the scale that we were likely going to need to protect our revenue streams, ensure our stability, continue in the succession that we wanted to, so on and henceforth. So we talked about what that needs to look like from a predictable, profitable, sustainable standpoint, not a cavalier and, okay, we need to go get it done. What is the cash flow management going to look like? What do the metrics need to be? How are we going to accomplish it? What's the timeline? And it's interesting because I remember the frustration and concern and borderline fear that my father had as part of that. And I think it helped mitigate that because we had those conversations in those board meetings, and there was that sounding board for him to be able to hear, and those metrics to be established to say, here's what needs to be accomplished on both parties' ends for this to be successful. And we defined what that success was. So when we got to the point where we knew what we thought was the best idea, then we started to put the brick and mortar in place and execute that plan. And in some capacity, we're still executing that plan. But the board was very influential in making sure that we knew what it needed to look like at each rung of the ladder, instead of just trying to think that we were going to springboard to the second level.
Gotcha. Okay, so tell us about that. What did physically what changed? You're operating out of Vandalia. Then what happened to the company? Where did you go next?
We made the decision that we wanted to start our growth journey in a contiguous network of where we're at. We started to tax our system and query our ERP to figure out where our revenue was coming from, and we backed into where our profitability was coming from. And then we started to look at what the market would support, and then we identified where that location was that we thought needed to be next. We think the process worked reasonably well, so what we did is kind of refine it a little bit and rinse and repeat. And that's a big part of our current growth strategy today, is to see where are the opportunities at in the marketplace. Where do we believe we can support that market from a contiguous network, so that we're not just flying solo in that space, but we've got a contingency plan with another nearby branch to support it, but not close enough that it's going to cannibalize existing sales at the same time.
Yes, that's obviously the golden ticket everybody wants, is to figure out how to do that. So you had identified Franklin first, correct?
Yes, Vandalia is located in the suburb of North Dayton, Ohio. And It's interesting. We thought before we studied the data that we would be going north to Lima, where we just recently opened. We found out through the data and the analysis that we needed to go to the south side of Dayton, which is where Franklin, Ohio is, approximately 30 minutes travel radius from Vandalia.
Gotcha. And then you also have two other footprints, correct? And those came after 16, so it was like 2017 or?
Yeah, I forgive me, I don't know. I believe we opened Sharonville, which is a suburb of northern Cincinnati, in 2018.
Okay.
And that gave us another 30-minute travel radius ballpark from our Franklin location. And then in 2019, we were presented with an opportunity to assist another locally owned rental company that was transitioning out. And we were able to acquire that company in northern Kentucky and absorb them into our system. And that was, I believe, a healthy acquisition for both parties, and allowed us to solidify a southern Cincinnati, northern Kentucky location, again, approximately 30 minutes away. And what we found was, based on the population density in our model, was that 30-minute travel radius in a densely populated MSA really gave us contiguous capacity and support, but also new and fresh revenue streams at the same time. Now, if there was more ruralness in between, we knew that we needed to widen that gap. And then ultimately we decided to go to Lima, Ohio, which is approximately an hour away from us, because we built some of the infrastructure to know how to support some of those ancillary branches better.
Wow, that's quite a bit of expansion in a very short period of time. What was your employee count change from 2011 up to 2020? What's it look like now?
I believe that in 2011 we were probably close to 30 folks on the team. And I would anticipate that we're going to be just shy of 100 here in the coming months.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's great to have an advisory board to kind of use every 90 days or so, every 120 days to get kind of some feedback on that. What would you consider? Do you have any other examples of how the advisory board may have come up big for Vandalia in terms of you just were perplexed and working on something in your head and you were able to share it with the group?
Yeah, absolutely. There's honestly a number of things. The reality is they are a completely impartial jury, and they will give you their God's honest feedback. Sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for and ask for. I can tell you that we had evaluated other acquisitions, and when we ran around the room, there's some that I probably would have moved forward with that ultimately the decision was made that this wasn't the right time or the right one. I know that I had wrestled with years over my personal feelings on environmental fees within the industry and the value they provided some of our downstream customer base. And ultimately, it was a push from our board of advisors that it was a single question. And I remember to this day where I was asked, are you selling what your customers are willing to buy, or are you selling what you want to sell? Stopped and noodled on that question, and I had to answer it honestly. And I said, well, I think by not moving forward, I'm selling what I want to sell. And the follow-up question, so if I hear you right, you're making a strategic decision to disadvantage your team and their growth.
I love it. It's like a business conscience that you have. It's awesome because there's so many people out there who are, they're the owner operator of the business. Maybe they have one coach or somebody who's providing some help to them. Obviously, we promote peer groups. We want you to have a peer group as an informal board of directors, but unfortunately, it's not at this level, right? So you get to meet them twice a year and you can communicate throughout the year. But man, it's just amazing to hear you talk about this advisory group and how you guys keep growing as a company. So any last words for our members regarding advisory boards?
I'll tell you one quick one that you just touched on. We find it invaluable to have that peer group and advisory board balance because you get two different things out of both. And our peer group, which we belong to an incredibly strong and beneficial peer group, allows us to seek that high-level industry knowledge. And we can ferret through there. And sometimes we find things out that we didn't even ask about just through observation and what takes place in the room. In our board of advisory meetings, we come in with a blank slate and a breadth and depth of experiences that allow us to blend those thoughts, observations, and opinions that we feel helps the cream rise and the best decisions to be made. So from a clarifying standpoint, I think that both have tremendous value, and the value of both together is the sweet spot for us. I would tell anyone that's considering it that if you do your pre-work and you put together a good solid presentation, your SWOT, your market analysis, your history, your plans, your story, to go out there and really identify those roles that would help you grow and succeed. And once you do that and you feel confident that those are the roles, then look externally at who and how those individuals might be. And what I've been flabbergasted about, honestly, is the absolute willingness of these high caliber individuals to take your appointments, to listen to your story, and have a genuine desire to help. Our compensation for our board meetings is very minimal. It's not what these folks do it for. Some will ask you to donate the money to a charity. Frankly, a lot of them don't need the money. But what they do get satisfaction out of is watching individuals grow and succeed and helping put their fingerprints on that next level and next layer and next generation of business that they can share that knowledge that they have. It's been amazing to me. Even the folks that we've reached out to and said, you're not our guy after we talked, I would have thought that would have been something that they would have taken offense to. And I've been shocked how much it isn't, and they continue to be an advocate for you just because you asked them to do so.
Wow.
So once you do the pre-work and you go out there and just ask the questions, just be honest and tell them you're going to fumble through it a little bit and accept that you will. And just like you asked them to do, they'll guide you through it and you'll come out stronger for having done it. It's been a phenomenal experience that, had it not been recommended to us as part of a requirement of succession plan that we had to do, I'm not certain we would have bit it off because of that intimidation. And I'm incredibly thankful that we did.
Excellent. Well, we know your time is valuable. We appreciate your 30 minutes today. And again, we appreciate you in the peer groups, the years you've been involved, as well as your leadership team, which participates in some of our leader groups. Again, just tremendous information today. Hey, everybody, that was Kurt Barney from Vandalia Rental. And thanks again, Kurt.
Thanks, Dan, for having me. I appreciate it.
And we're going to be back next week with yet another episode of Peer Talk. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Peer Talk from Peer Executive Groups, produced and directed by Noah Crowley and hosted by Dan Crowley. Subscribe to this podcast for notifications of future episodes of Peer Talk.